I'm Tejas. I've been writing code for 15 officially, and now I'm
Damn.
31. So I don't know, pick 16 or 20 something years.
We're here to talk about React and React server components and your React book. I've never written a line of code of React in my life. Be easy on us.
Yeah, so what was the actual use case? I mean, people were really happy with React right as it is. Why there was need to introduce RSC?
Solutions, jQuery, Backbone, Knockout.js, Angular.js. And we go like, these are cool, but like, if they were so cool, why did React have to exist?
We talked about React, we talked about RSCs, we talked about the book, Fluent React. Welcome back to episode 4 of This is Tech Talks. I'm Jay Bell, your host, along with Santosh, my co-host. How's it going this morning or afternoon for you, Santosh? We're like 9 hours apart or something like that, so I always get confused.
Yeah, it's at least me and Tejas at the same time zone, so we are almost like ending our days.
Yeah, I just rolled out of bed, so I got my coffee in front of me, so hopefully I can wake up by the end of the episode. Today we have with us Tejas. How's it going?
It's going good. Thanks for asking.
Good. Do you want to just give a little intro on yourself, what you do, who you are, why people should listen to you or not? I don't know. Completely up to you.
Yeah, I'm Tejas. I've been writing code for, since I was 8 years old unofficially, and then since I was like 15 officially, and now I'm 31. So I don't know, pick 16 or 20 something years. I've been doing that for a while. Got into front end initially, and sort of reached the limits of what I could do with the front end. And I'm talking about like the really complex problems of like virtualization and how do you structure things and so on. Started using React around 2014. Still use it to this day. Just finished a book actually on React with O'Reilly.
Nice.
And so having written a lot of code for a long time, I don't know. I tend to find it a little bit boring. Like it's not. I don't mean that disparagingly. Like it's fun, but I sort of know my way around pretty much anything in the field of web engineering. And so nowadays I spend my time consulting around developer experience and developer tooling, and also speaking at conferences.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like once you hit a certain level, whatever that level may be in terms of like skill set or like solved problems in the space that you work in, you tend to go like one way or the other, where you're like, okay, let's do the bleeding edge stuff, or it's like the more productivity or teaching education type route to try and solve the next set of problems, right?
And there's often overlap between them, because like right now, where I'd say AI is somewhat bleeding edge, especially things like RAG and RLHF and things like that, and the advent of the answering engines as opposed to search engines and things like that. And so I do a fair amount of teaching on the topic, and also get to play with the bleeding edge tools to build answering engines myself. Things like perplexity.ai, really great tool. I don't know if you've had the privilege of using it yet, but there's now coming out a bunch of developer tools that enable developers to build things like these AI powered search engines. It's really cool. And so it's fun to be on the bleeding edge and then teach the bleeding edge. That's sort of, I like that you put it that way. That's basically what I do these days.
Nice. That's really cool.
And this Perplexity, it's available with our internet, right? I mean, our browser, if I'm not wrong.
It's a website and an app, so it's available everywhere.
Okay.
It's not dependent on a single browser. I feel a little bit proud because the founder and CEO is an Indian dude like us. His name is Arvind, really great guy. And so it's just an answering engine. And what it will do is it will search the web for your query, generate like 25 results from somewhere, and then read those results and give you the cliff notes, so to speak.
Right.
Which is really just giving you the answer you're looking for, as opposed to you having to like click through a bunch of ads and then a bunch of results and so on and so forth. This isn't available just exclusive to Arc. However, Arc is releasing Arc Search, which if you type in a query and press Shift Enter, Arc will basically, the browser will do that for you. It will read the search results and then open the right tabs for you. But that's different. But that's what I'm saying. Like this is the sort of bleeding edge that I find a lot of fun to explore.
So it's a real-time RAG search engine.
Exactly. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Cool. That's really interesting. I've been building this like small little fun side project using just standard reg for Magic the Gathering, the card game. And I had a really good time doing it. So trying to introduce real-time elements where like it'll actually like transform the search into a like using natural language into like a full text search and all this kind of stuff, and then pull things, whether that's cache data or real-time data. So it's really, really interesting stuff. So I'm jealous that you get to work on it often.
Yeah, right now
sure.
one of the biggest unfinished, unsolved problems is like multi-tenant security and RAG-enabled AI. Like this is nobody solved this, and this is probably the next Y Combinator $1 million startup. Anyway,
sounds about right. There's going to be a lot of big startups coming out of the like AI space in the next 5 years. I bet. I mean, we're already seeing them, right? Like, they're already here. The big ones are already here, right? Anyway, React. We're here to talk about React, right? React and React server components and your React book. I've never written a line of code of React in my life. So
it's like very early.
Be easy on us because I don't know anything about it beyond the fact that I know the basics, obviously, that it's a web framework and I'm an Angular developer, so I can understand all the concepts. Obviously, I've just never written a line of code of it before. So
yeah.
What are, I guess, like the hot topic right now are RSCs, right? React server components, and the naming of them, and are they the right naming, all this kind of stuff. So give us a little brief overview of like what are RSCs. Because I'm going to make the assumption everybody knows what React is. I think that's probably a pretty decent assumption to make.
Yeah. React is basically like stripped down Angular with JSX. Like there's a Venn. If you've written Angular, there's a Venn diagram, right? So a UI library is a UI library, and Angular is more of a UI framework, and React's literally just a library. It exports functions that you use. It doesn't have opinions about anything. No directory structure, no routing, no dependency injection primitives. It's literally just like a library, and I think that's the distinction. And I think that's a fair assumption that everybody sort of gets that. About server components, I believe that the term server anything is a term that is cursed, because like look at serverless, right? What a misnomer. Serverless. So then there was lots of discourse around this, like, oh, serverless doesn't mean there's no servers, and there is a server, it's just you don't deal with it, etc., etc. And server components are the same. A lot of people say a lot of things about server components. I thankfully have been privileged enough to first write a book where chapter 9 is dedicated to server components, but also this was done in consultation with the React team and a number of React experts in the industry who are my peers. So it's the best that I could do, consulting with the people who make React and the people who use React heavily. And so because of that, I feel like I have a reasonable understanding of them. And so yes, I can share that. React server components are essentially components that execute in transit. That means not on the client's device, but they execute ahead of the client's device. That's really all it is.
On the server.
Let's not think about the cursed word. Because even if we explore, okay, what the server, cool. Which server? What is the server? When we develop locally, we have a dev server, right? You run a development server and you have like port 3000 or 8080, and it's serving you local. That's a server, cool. But then when you push your changes, push your website, push your app, whatever it may be, there's another intermediary server that will run tests, that will build things, etc. So there's already another server. And then your built assets go to a CDN, which is another server. And finally, all the server stuff ends and the client stuff begins, right? You download all the stuff from ahead of time. So server components sort of misses the mark because it implies like one server, when in reality, in transit, there's many, many, many servers that your application and website goes between. And that's sort of the problem. And so React server components are components that execute on any server that is not the client's device. Another way of saying it is server components are non-client components. I think that's probably better. But that's also wrong because server components run also on the client in some instances. And so you can see where we start to get into some of the problems.
Yeah.
The gist of it is it's very similar to like PHP, where we were already server rendering HTML and sending it to the client device, and then jQuery would pick it up on the client, for example. However, in this case, the evolution, if you call it an evolution, is that it's just a React JSX on both sides of the thing, on the server side and on the client side. And because of that, when you request a server component from a server for some like calculate this and update it and send me the output, then what React will do is it will render that to a bunch of like a tree of React on the server side, send the JSON to the client side, and React on the client side just updates the UI based on the server sent component. That's my best effort at explaining server components in a nutshell. So the question then about what is the server? A server component could execute on your local server. It could execute on your build server, so your Netlify or your Vercel, with privileged access to the file system, so it can like read Markdown and stuff. And then as an output built artifact, it can just output a JavaScript bundle, just a full JavaScript bundle where it has already read Markdown, and so the bundle contains a bunch of text. And that then is sent to your client. And for them, they just download that JavaScript bundle that has read from your file system and stuff and the server components. And what it downloads is a JavaScript bundle full of client components that that are rendered in that update. And so that's one instance. However, you can use server components for more dynamic workflows, right? So for example, soft navigation, where you click a link, and instead of going to an entirely new page, sort of like before the JavaScript revolution, what you can do is you can override all anchor links with an href attribute and say, instead of actually navigating, event.prevent default, fetch from my React server the next page as a component, and then React on the client side will just re-render the root with this new component. And so you have soft navigation.
It's somewhere in between an SPA and whatever sites were called before SPAs existed.
MPA. That's right.
An MPA?
It's an MPA that's progressively enhanced to be an SPA. Yeah. And that's really cool, because if you don't have JavaScript, then your event.prevent default is not going to happen on the anchor link, and you'll still navigate. And if you have JavaScript, then you can offer a really nice like transition in the crossfade, or however you want to soft navigate.
That's really cool.
You can also, if you do the soft navigation, resolve all your data dependencies on the server side and just send static data over the wire. And that saves you a bunch of data fetching round trips, etc. Especially because the server component is typically deployed close to the data geographically, and so the round trip isn't as long. So
that makes sense. Really cool.
So just to ask one question, just to ask one question. So what was the actual use case? I mean, people were really happy with React right as it is. Why there was need to introduce RSC?
That's a really great question. The answer will vary based on who you talk to, but from the team at Meta, I had a guess as to the motivation behind this, and turns out I was also wrong. So what I'll do is I'll tell you my guess, and I'll tell you the guess from the team I spoke with at Meta. So my guess was we ship way too much JavaScript. A typical React application is orders of megabytes, somewhere between 2 and 5 megabytes minimum. And you can actually see this on the web. If you go to like reddit.com, new Reddit uses React and it feels heavy and clunky, and I hate this experience. Whereas old Reddit was like Hacker News, just like text links and navigate. It was really nice. In fact, so many people hate new Reddit that you can still access old Reddit at old.reddit.com. And that's the effect of like adding React. Unfortunately, it was React in the case of Reddit, but we can maybe generalize and say it's the effect of adding some UI library that is very heavy. It just feels sluggish and slow. Okay, so my thesis was, we ship way too much JavaScript, and often it's libraries and dependencies that people don't even need or use. So things like date formatters, date fns, moment.js, that itself is a 2 megabyte dependency or something, unGzipped. And so what if we could import that on the server, use it on the server, get a string of a formatted date, and send that over the network? So then we're sending way fewer megabytes, right? Because all our dependencies are on the server side. So that was my guess. It was to minimize the bundle size. In fact, server components, when done right, can be 0 kilobytes of bundle size and then dynamically loaded as needed, sort of like Quick does it. So that was my guess. I asked the team about it, and they said, yeah, that's part of it, but that's not the whole picture. the whole picture was to improve and perfect the data fetching story in React. Because prior to server components, data fetching in React often required multiple network round trips as opposed to one, always. So you download the web page that encounters a script tag somewhere, then you download React from the bundle, then React has to render everything, and then somewhere in the render tree there's a data fetch. So then it's got to go to another server, fetch the data. So the number of round trips and waterfalls are enormous usually with client rendered applications and applications without server components. And so the answer to this is, what if we could just have components that ahead of time fetch all the data, and all they return is complete baked markup. And that's why server components exist.
Makes sense. So who, like, okay, I guess is RSC like a standard, or was it a feature created by someone that's being adopted by others? Because like React is the overall library, right? And there's like a million flavors of React. There's Next and Remix and et cetera, that all use React, right? But like, was RSC created by a single person as an entity for their flavor of React, and others are adopting it? Or like, what's the story there with like where RSCs came from, and like who quote unquote owns them in terms of like is like pushing the standard forward?
That's a really good question. The safest answer, the safest like non-political answers, it's the community. Everybody sort of likes, and you can sort of see it on social media as well. But this is an initiative, as far as I know, that is owned by the React core team, and so it's not even a single entity, right? It's you could say it's Meta, but it's not, because most of the React team's on Vercel now. And I've heard things, I can't corroborate any of it, but I've heard that React server components, the team really, really wanted to go for it because it's the logical next step after adding concurrent features, and things like use transition. So React, I don't know if you know this, React will concurrently render, and what that means is it can render multiple futures, multiple next states in parallel, and abort rendering if some higher priority update comes in. So React could be like incrementing my counter, but if I type into a text input and the counter update hasn't been made yet, then it will cancel that update, prioritize my text input, so the input field updating, and then do the update. So it has this like priority system. And so the next logical evolution from that was server components. That is according to the team. I've heard a rumor, and I need to emphasize this is just a rumor, so I'd probably take it with a grain of salt, that Meta isn't really fully on board with server components as a mechanism to help its business. And that's why a bunch of folks just was like, I'm just going to go work on this at Vercel. Also because Vercel has a vested interest in this, right? Like the more you depend on the server, the more you pay them for their servers. And so that's sort of the landscape around it. But to answer your question, the core team is a huge proponent of this. And you know what's interesting? I feel like the core team gets it way more than the vast majority of React devs. Like, and they're having quite a bit of trouble explaining why it's valuable. At least this is what it looks like on social media. And like they're too nice to say it. But I feel like at some level, if I was there, I would be thinking, gosh, why don't y'all get it? It's so much better.
Yeah. I think that's not unique from my experience. I'll preface it with that. That's not unique to just React. We see that across many different framework communities, right? Like, let's take Angular, for example, right? Like the Angular team gets it, right? Like Santosh and I are GDEs, so we talk to and hang out with the Angular team quite a bit, right? They get it. They get where the framework needs to go, both in terms of, web standards and where the web's going and like what needs to be worked on. I trust them that they're making the right decisions. But this isn't like a bad thing in terms of them. They're teams that manage and build frameworks are a little bit stepped away, not purposefully, from the people actually working on them, because there's so many devs that are working at like big companies or people that are versions behind or aren't involved in the community a lot. They just got into the web dev experience, in the last 2 years or whatever it might be, right? And it's just like the majority of devs working with insert your framework here just aren't thinking about the way the web's moving the same way as the teams that are building the frameworks. And that's not like, it's not like it's a bad thing on either side, right? Like I'm not going to like hold either side against one another because there's this like gap. It's just like their focuses are different, right? Like the frameworks team to think like, where's the web going and what does the framework need to do so that we can push it forward and make sure that we're leveraging it, right? The standard dev,
however,
thinking,
but where the web's going, and where the web's going, I feel like the libraries and framework authors do keep track of that, and oftentimes things like Angular, Vue, React, Svelte, Solid, etc., they're all abstractions on the web. So
exactly,
if they're abstractions and if they're true to abstraction, then they shouldn't require us to change anything, the way we think, the way we code. And so how then do you justify server components, which is a fundamental shift in the way we write code?
absolutely.
How does that relate back to the web platform, tracking, as you talked about? And this is where I feel like a lot of the controversy. Yeah, this is where I feel like a lot of the controversy is. It's really not keeping track with the web platform. It's an optimization that the core team feels is super useful and valid and interesting, whereas the broader community, perhaps they just don't understand it, like you said, because they're busy building their company's websites. But I've heard a number of arguments to be made for, dude, like what was wrong with client-side applications? Like my application is so well optimized that the multiple round trips, the core problem that server components was designed to solve, isn't even a problem, right? And I think the best example of this is X, formerly Twitter.com, where I don't know if you've noticed, you probably have, but when you open it, you will see like 8 different spinners in 8 different places. But the interesting thing is, but nobody cares. As far as I know, right? You say that, but you still use it. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So is it really that horrible? Like then this is the counter argument to RSCs. Like if your product is truly useful and valuable, then users are not going to lose their minds over spinners to the degree that framework authors talk about. Like for example, airplane booking websites, in my opinion, are the worst experiences on the internet. But we all deal with it. We all deal with it because we have to book tickets. We just have to, and so a lot of the discourse is, yes, server components are super valuable because they enable instant, fast user experience. And I mean, they're huge for security also. You can literally query your database, your Postgres database, directly from a server component. Absolutely. You don't have to think about SQL injection because it's not accepting input. And if it is, of course, then that's a client component. But server components are extremely secure as well. Bunch of benefits. But on the other side, you have a bunch of devs going like, okay, but why? And I think this is a generational change. What that means is the original React developers from like 10 years ago are going to not care and just use Vite, do client-side apps. But from 2022 onwards, whoever gets into React, those will be the server component folks. And over time, it will outgrow client components only. But that's sort of where it is right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there for sure with everything that you just said, right? Like, one thing that I feel like I've noticed on, call it the online discourse around just web development in general, no specific framework, right? It's like when a framework says a thing, right, in an official capacity, it feels like everybody thinks that applies to everybody, which is never true, right? It's like, there are a million perfectly fine use cases for an SPA. So like the React team, for example, isn't saying, oh, RSCs are the new thing. All of you need to rewrite your SPAs to use RSCs. That's not what they're saying, right? They're saying this is a better way to do some things. And if you're starting like a greenfield project, for example, or like you actually do have an optimization problem and you want to solve this waterfall, like here's a tool to do it. They're not saying like, hey, everyone, old ways out, new ways in. This is the only right way now, and everyone should abide by this, right? Like it's not like everyone needs to do this type of thing, which I feel like is how people take a lot of things that frameworks say nowadays, and it's like that's not what they're saying. At least that's the feeling that I get from like the online discourse around framework opinion and features for that matter.
I agree that happens quite a lot. For example, someone saying, "Hey, I love Tailwind. I used it for my project," and others going like, "Oh my gosh, the class names get too long." But the class names don't always get too long. It just depends on how you use it. But in the case of React, the core team specifically, I had a public conversation with Dan from the core team where I mentioned, okay, but can we agree that server components are not well suited to like some internal dashboard tool for your organization? Because that, I mean, you've got like graphs and you've got lots of data, and it's very localized. Like this is not something you're going to be. You can't like render animated visualizations on the server, right? And to my surprise, Dan said, no, actually, server components is a great use case for this. And in fact, server components directly benefit the vast majority of React applications, almost every application. And this is what you just mentioned, that they don't say this. And it's true in most cases. However, in the React case, there does seem to be a lot coming from the core team that, no, this is the blessed and ideal way is to start with the server. And again, that's probably why people are so polarized about it, because I feel like whether we try to take our personal attachment and emotions out of code or not, it's code we wrote and it's patterns we chose. And when you say things like that, what you're telling developers is your code base is now wrong. It's now obsolete. And as an engineer, nobody wants to hear that. And that's why I think there's some pushback. However, it's even compounded, right, by the fact that there's no incremental migration path from a traditional React code base to RSCs yet. That'll probably come, and I think that would bless the community and save it significantly. But yeah, the blessed path is to go with server components. But I think there needs to be a lot of work to educate people about how and when and why, frankly, because I still stand by the fact that we don't need Lighthouse 100. This is Lighthouse 100 is equivalent to like unit test code coverage 100%. It's just why you don't need it. Now, if you have it, awesome. But if you're like 90, if you're in the green, I feel like you should be okay anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is my opinion, as a company that has only a certain amount of resources, right? Like I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm usually involved in startups, right? If my internal dashboard is sitting at 85, 90 or whatever it might be at, it doesn't matter. If it's good, I'm not going to spend my resources micro optimizing it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to do something that actually has a benefit to my company and to our product, and that's where I'm going to spend my resources, right? Now, if I get it for free, sure, of course, right. I'll gladly take it for free, right? But yeah.
And if you're an e-commerce store that needs everything to be instant so people can impulse buy things without thinking while it loads, then you can have that discussion. It's just a question of ROI, right? And
I mean, there's another question. Like probably we'll talk about your book soon, but last question maybe. So I have seen like there is a conflict between, there are two major meta frameworks, right? Remix and Next. But when I see the conversation on the internet, it looks like Remix don't want to go with RSC, and they just introduce now their spa mode. So what do you think what's going there?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Honestly, I don't know why Remix has not gone RSC yet. I think if I was to guess, I would guess that the Remix authors consider it still young and canary, so to speak. And that's because a lot of it is, I mean, if you go read the React documentation, there's a number of hooks. Hooks are control flow primitives. There's a number of hooks. For example, use form state, use form status. Those are two distinct hooks with almost the same name. But these hooks are alpha. They're not considered production ready. However, you can use them with like Nextjs. And so if there was a reason, if I was a Remix author, I would hesitate because I want these primitives to be more fleshed out before I add them to my framework. I don't know if that's the case for Remix. I should actually probably talk to them. We should get them on this podcast and talk to them about it. There's a great remix. Yeah, what's his name? The head of DevRel at Remix. His name is Brooks. He's a fantastic person. I would recommend. Anyway, but I'll probably DM him after and ask why. But with Nextjs, I mean, they're full on server components. I feel like for two reasons. One, the core team works at Nextjs and cares about it significantly. And then two, there's a financial incentive for Vercel. The more people who need servers, they offer servers. And the cool thing is, it's seamless, it's frictionless to deploy Nextjs to Vercel. And some would say that's quite expensive over time. It is double the cost of AWS and Cloudflare, as far as I know. So it's pretty expensive, but you're paying for a seamless premium experience. And so from my perspective, if I have the money, I'm spending it there, especially if it saves a bunch of developer time who are going to then spend that time like configuring AWS clusters and so on. So it's just a question of ROI,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Side note, I'm currently moving our servers off of AWS because I hate dealing with it so much.
Off of AWS to where? To something managed like Vercel or Netlog?
To Fly.io. Yeah. And
that's awesome.
You want to talk about an amazing experience? Wow. Fly is awesome to work with. Not for like our like client-side applications, obviously. It's for like our actual like API service and stuff like that. But
that's so cool.
Yeah.
I would be interested to hear if you considered flight control, because I find this fascinating, right? The whole reason flight control exists is because AWS is so difficult. And the cool thing is AWS doesn't really have an incentive to make it nice because they get like a $10 billion bill from Netflix. And so they're like, why should we care? We make money. And so the reason for flight control to exist is sound. And in fact, that's all they do. They just like give you AWS, but with a nicer UI. Absolutely nuts. Is that something you've tried, or was the decision for Fly just sort of?
I saw a lot about it online. So Kent C. Dodds, that used to work on Remix, right? He talks with Fly a lot on Twitter, and I started using it for a side project, and I really liked it. And I was like, this is really nice. Trellis just needs something significantly lighter than AWS. We don't need 99.99% of what AWS offers. I'm just going to simplify us down and make it just so much easier on me, because I effectively one-man our DevOps and our deployment process and our CI pipelines and everything like that at Trellis. So like, I don't want to deal with AWS anymore. Almost full stop. I'm over it. And Fly was just super nice to work with. So if you're looking for servers, use fly.io. I guess I don't work there. I'm not paid for this. But yeah, just really enjoyable. So no, I haven't looked at flight control. I've seen it around, but I just didn't even go down that route, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Cool. Now I have to try out Fly. That's a really glowing review.
Yeah. And they're currently working on a partnership with Supabase as well. So you can have like a Postgres cluster managed through Fly, but run on Supabase. So yeah, they're working on all these really awesome like extension and partnerships and stuff like that, where it's like all you need is inside Fly, but it's like they're not responsible for every service kind of thing. So they're like, they can get more scale and better features without having to like manage it all themselves. So anyway,
that is
really
so
cool. Yeah. Your book. Tell us about your book. What's it called? What's the title of it? Is it just React?
It's called Fluent React.
Okay.
And it's different. It's cut from a different cloth than other books, because it's not so much about how to use React, because there's plenty of books about that. There's React.devs. There's the docs for that. And I would definitely not trust my book as the best on how to use React, because the docs are maintained by the people who build React. So my book doesn't do that. It's more about how React works inside. So things like the virtual DOM, but also things like fiber and concurrent reconciliation, how server components tie into, how do server components even work from an internals perspective. So yeah, just looking at all of the ways React works on the inside with like code snippets from the React source code at the time of writing, to help developers sort of understand what's going on under the hood. It's not really something that people need to know to use React effectively. It's not something that, okay, well, it will help people in their day job, that's for sure, but it's not pivotal to using React, put it that way. I do believe, though, that learning those internals will help you write more natural, dare I say, fluent code that works with the framework as opposed to fighting against it.
Makes sense. So it's like more, it's not meant for the beginner necessarily, right? Like someone that's just learning.
Be read. Yeah,
Okay.
it could be read by the beginner, but they're probably not going to learn about how to build an application with React. So the assumption is you've built maybe a to-do list or something. And so I get depends how you define beginner, right? Because beginner does in this context would mean somebody who's built like something basic with React to get to understand it vaguely. Yeah, it's definitely not fit for people who have never written a line of React ever before. That's so the expectation is you read the docs at react.dev and then come find my book.
Okay. Does that hold true for people that have written other sites using other frameworks, or are you saying more like the people that have never built a site before?
No,
like,
would
your book be a good fit for me, who's never written a line of React but has written a ton of Angular code?
Yeah, because React is just JavaScript, as they say. So yes, anyone who knows JavaScript should be good. Again, it won't teach you how to go from zero to full site, but it will teach you enough. If you're a JavaScript developer or TypeScript, it will teach you enough about how React works to then have you go like, oh, cool, I could build this myself. And so it will remove a lot of the imposter syndrome about React being like this esoteric thing that I don't know how it works, but it's good. No, you'll feel like, okay, no, I do know how it works. In fact, it's kind of simple. And that's the goal, right? Is to eliminate sort of the mystique and the imposter syndrome about it, and to go like, no, this is just JavaScript. Believe me, you could write this yourself.
Cool. Awesome.
So are you covering like RSC is mostly focused on RSC, or it's like the internals of React, and then you're talking about the meta frameworks as well?
Yeah, it's not exclusively focused on RSC. There's one chapter dedicated to it because RSC is still somewhat early. So I think it doesn't make sense to make RSC the hero of it, even though there are people saying that RSC should be the hero of things. No, it starts with it's about like 9 or 10 chapters in total. And it starts with not even any technical. The first chapter is entirely history. It's like, it answers the question, like, why is React a thing? So we look at, we sort of travel back in time and we look at other solutions, jQuery, Backbone, Knockout.js, Angular.js. And we go like, these are cool, but like, if they were so cool, why did React have to exist, right? And we look at the trade-offs between them and React. And we look at really just answering the question, why does React exist? In the second chapter, we look at JSX. So this like JavaScript augmentation. And we talk about how it works and how, if you wanted to design your own extension of JavaScript, how does that work? We get into a lot of like compiler theory and understand what transpilation means. Why do you need Babel, for example? And we just talk deeply about that. There's like 25, 30 pages on that. Then we talk about the virtual DOM. How does it work? How does it compare to the actual DOM? For example, why does it need to exist? Why is it somehow faster than the real DOM? Then we talk about reconciliation. That's basically you telling React, like, I want my UI to do this, and React reconciling that with the browser. How does that work? What's the algorithm like? And then we look at some patterns. This is just code patterns, things like higher order components and control props. A lot of these were popularized by Ken C. Dodds, and so we attribute him there. He also wrote the foreword for the book, fun fact. And then that's up until about chapter 5. And then we go full server side. So we talk about server side, we talk about concurrent rendering, frameworks. We actually like build our own framework, like our own Nextjs clone in the book, in code, to understand like how would I build one if I wanted to, just to understand it. And then finally we wrap up with server components and alternatives to React. So there's a portion on Angular and Svelte, Solid and Quick, etc., with just a logical comparison between them. Not necessarily saying this is better than that, but it's just important to know the differences. For example, how change detection works in Angular and how that's evolving towards signals with Angular 17. And similar, how Quick is sort of close to React, but the whole resumability thing and how it compares with hydration. I could talk for a lot about this, but that's basically the gist. So it's very, very internals focused. The first half is why React is the way it is and how it looks under the hood. And the second half is full server side.
So where people can buy this book?
That's a great question. It's going to be releasing March 24th internationally. And so people can buy it anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Forbes. Is Forbes a bookstore? I don't know. But basically, any bookstore. I don't know why I said Forbes. Just came to mind. We have a store in Germany called Dussmann and another store called Thalia. You could probably buy it there. You just buy it wherever books are. O'Reilly has a bunch of agreements with various places. So, but probably Amazon's the easiest, I assume.
Makes sense. Amazon with their horrible lighthouse scores.
See, exactly. Oh, man, Amazon's nasty. You know, I saw one of their banners, and it was a JPEG. So it looked like a div with elements. It looked like a proper, but it was just a JPEG with like very low quality. And I was like, whoa, I haven't seen this since like 2001.
Yeah,
but it works.
Sometimes it's just like, just put this banner up. Here's a picture. Use the picture. Make the banner.
And also, speaking of spinners, like AWS console, you know, it's just basically spinners after spinners. But again,
everything
billions of dollars.
Like a spinner. Yeah.
So yeah, that's so I'm not fully sold on server components, frankly. Also, there's this big emphasis using server-side functionality to eradicate spinners in favor of server rendering and server components. I tried it. I built a full production application using only server components, not a spinner in sight, except for when you click something like a form submit in the client, then you need a spinner. But besides that, absolutely no initial loading spinner, zero. The result, and I did this twice, and one of them is actually, both of them are still in production today. And the interesting finding is that it's just as slow as with spinners. However, there's no feedback. There's no spinners. So you basically moved the spinner from the user's browser to the server where nobody can see it. And the only spinner they see is the spinner next to the page title on the tab. There's still a spinner there. It's just, you don't get that like instant feedback. So there's a case to be made for maybe the UI spinner approach is better. So this is still very debated. It's somewhat of a barbed wire topic. People are going to be mad at me for something I said here, but I think 100%. There is no...
You're not going to get away from that, though, unfortunately, no matter where you go or what you say. So
I'd love to be proven wrong. I mean, I'd love for someone to say, hey, no, server components are the best way. Here's why. Here's empirically an app built this way that is measurably faster in every way than the other. I'd love to see that. I haven't yet.
Right.
In fact, Flight Control, the CEO, co-founder, just wrote a blog article about this. Nextjs App Router, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's on flightcontrol.dev on their blog. Amazing. That is a very well-balanced take on the state of these things today. And if you want to include that in the show notes for people to go read, I'd recommend it.
Sweet. Yeah, absolutely. We'll put it in there. Cool. I learned a lot about React in the last 42 minutes and 30 seconds. More than I knew before, that's for sure.
That is so great.
Yeah. Still don't know if I'm going to have time to build anything with it. But I did tell we had Kent on the Angular Plus Show podcast last Wednesday, I think, and he convinced me that I needed to go try Remix. I know that at the very least. So maybe now you've convinced me of RSCs and or React, at least giving them a try. And, you know, maybe I should go write a line of React code, honestly. Maybe just one. Get an app.
The easiest way to get started is to build a little counter. So you just need something to show the count and then like an increment button. If you go to react.new, everything's done. You just like literally write like 3 lines and then you can say, I've written React code. I get it.
Nice. Technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Yeah.
Santosh, is there anything else that we want to cover here? We talked about React, we talked about RSCs, we talked about the book, Fluent React. Anything else?
Of course, we can talk for an hour, but of course we have things to do. So of course we will end this show. This recording right now, and probably we can invite Tejas again to talk about. I mean, there are so many things like we can talk about. Like for example, I mean, I still don't get like why React is not adopting signals when everyone is. So of course,
I could
the other
I could answer
the
that.
other one, yeah.
Okay,
I can answer that for you in
yeah.
one sentence. One sentence. It's because the React team believes that signals are an implementation detail that should be abstracted away, but developers shouldn't have to work with this directly. And so they may adopt signals, but even if they do, it would be like inside React. So you wouldn't have direct access to it because ultimately they frame React as a developer experience tool above and beyond anything else. So that's the gist of it. But yes,
So-
we can definitely talk more about it.
So it would be more like compiler magic than anything else. I know one framework did this. Oh, was it Svelte? Not with runes. That's new. But previously they waited. I don't know if it was signals or not, but there was some kind of implementation where like there was compiler magic going on where they transformed what the devs were writing into some kind of internal structure that was like this. Did I make that up?
So
Or did I
that
hear
is
that?
no, that is Svelte. It wasn't signals, but they did have a reactive system where you
That's
use
what it was.
labeled statements in JavaScript, which is syntax that nobody knows. It's like $ colon braces,
Right.
and you use that, and then the Svelte compiler turns it into highly performant reactive JavaScript. How? Nobody knows. It's a compiler.
Compiler magic. So are you saying that if the React core team is going to support signals in some way, it would be more in line with something like that versus like us as devs writing signal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think the React team will never support signals. Well, because signals are entirely counter to the way React is built. So to facilitate React working with signals, you would have to rewrite React again. And that's something I think nobody has any interest in. And so what the React team is doing to help achieve some level of fine-grained reactivity is to create a compiler, again, these compiler magic, that will read the React code that developers have written and then automatically memoize values that it knows will not change based on the rules of React. So, React has a lot of rules, sort of unidirectional data flow, so state should travel down. Components are not allowed to mutate their props, et cetera, et cetera. There's about 7 rules of React. And so the compiler, accounting for these rules, can infer, okay, so this value, this value, this value is never going to change. And so it will automatically at build time cache those values and then just return them from their same position in memory. So yes, compiler tricks that makes reactivity way more fine-grained, but nowhere near as fine-grained as solid, Angular, Quick, etc. Because at the end of the day, despite such compiler magic, React will still need to recursively call each component. Even if there are no changes, it will need to call the component to detect if there's changes. And so despite the best caching, you've still got to walk an entire component tree. Whereas with signals, you never need to do that. So there will be performance benefits, but it will still not match Angular, Solid, etc.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I know fine-grained reactivity is definitely one of the big things, or the biggest thing in terms of, the way the rendering engine is actually working under the hood, right? With frameworks and how they're implementing signals out. I'm really excited for the standardization that's going to come from all of the frameworks working together on signals.
Same. Yeah, there's a rumor that, well, not even a rumor, there's a TC39 proposal, right? To adopt signals as a first-class citizen into the JavaScript programming language. Absolutely nuts.
Yeah. See how long that takes. Observables just got there as well. So that one's been going for a while.
They're in the language?
Not yet. They're on stage 2. I can't remember exactly what stage they're at now, but they just. I'll look it up now so that we have the most updated. Ben Lesh obviously tweets about it all the time. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, they're at one of the. I think they might be stage 2. So they're hopefully going. You can play with them in Chrome if you enable a certain flag, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So there's a native observable primitive in some kind of hidden mode inside of Chrome currently. I don't know what version, so don't just try and go and try it and then get mad at me. But yeah. So anyway, yeah, it'd be sweet to see signals follow the same path, right? And then they're just supported in the not the framework, but the actual the engine, the JavaScript.
Yeah, then I wonder how React would work, because then it's part of the web platform.
Exactly.
so React wouldn't need to support it. Yeah, that would frame a whole different conversation.
Okay, yeah. So they're currently in the released version of Chrome under the observable -API flag, if anybody wants to try them. There we go. Observables in the browser. Who would have thunk it?
Can't
Just
wait
in
till they
time
say
for
the
us
same
to-
about signals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very excited.
Thanks again, Tejas. Thanks for joining, and it was a great conversation with you. And we would love to host you again in future. Let's maybe we can plan something. And thanks again, Jay, for hosting this. And we will be. So we also ask our guests to actually promote something which they like. So if you have something to promote.
I have absolutely nothing to promote. Okay, well, maybe one thing. I'm starting a podcast. I don't know when.
Hell
Sometime this year. It's called Contagious Code because my name's Tejas, like contagious code. Anyway, yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'd love to get you on, both of you, at some point as well as guests. But it's a similar format to this, except it's longer form. Not too long, but for example, there's a podcast here in Germany called Alles Gesagt, where the host and the guest sit and talk until the guests have nothing more to say. So there's no like fixed time of recording. It's just like, okay, when are you out of things to say? And it's usually like celebrities and interesting people, and
Right.
episodes will go from like 6 to 11 hours long. So I'm not doing something like that, but
Yeah.
With enough depth that people go away with like, wow, I feel more confident in this topic right now. Sort of like this. We did that with React Server Components, and Jay, you even said that. So yeah, that's what we're going for.
Interesting. Okay.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, and we will be back with another episode. So next episode with Daniel. Oh, okay. So we'll be talking about test-driven development in our next episode, and see you soon. So thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.